When this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers. He'll have my best wishes.
It was called a civil debate. The first and only vice presidential debate this election season came and went on Tuesday night. Anyone expecting fireworks might have been surprised. Republican J.D. Vance showed the polish of a trained Yale Law School lawyer. Democrat Tim Walz came across as more of a plain-spoken Midwest governor. Both men's focus seemed more trained on attacking the top of the ticket than on each other. Mark Irons has our EWTN News Election report.
The vice presidential debate had an air of civility.
And first of all, thanks, Governor.
Thank you, Senator Vance.
And even areas of common ground.
And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agreed.
And I think there's a lot of agreement.
But the areas of disagreement were also clear, including on foreign affairs as war continues in the Middle East.
We need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence.
On border security and immigration, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz blamed Donald Trump for telling Republicans to stop the passage of a bipartisan reform bill earlier this year.
As soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no. Told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue.
U.S. Senator J.D. Vance said Vice President Kamala Harris has failed to enforce border security. He also shared how he believes Donald Trump's proposal to deport undocumented immigrants could be carried out, starting with criminals.
I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers.
The economy and tax policy was debated.
Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share.
To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again.
Healthcare and the future of the Affordable Care Act was also discussed.
Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies.
Meanwhile, on abortion, Vance, a Catholic convert, said it should be left up to the states to decide.
Let the individual states make their abortion policy, and I think that's what makes the most sense.
During the debate, Donald Trump tweeted, "I would not support a federal abortion ban under any circumstances and would, in fact, veto it." Kamala Harris has said she wants to restore abortion access at the federal level by codifying the provisions in Roe v. Wade.
We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice.
Vance asked how far Walz, a Lutheran who was raised Catholic, would go in support of abortion.
Do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will?
And he said a Minnesota bill Walz signed doesn't provide protection for infants who have survived abortion attempts.
That is fundamentally barbaric.
Later, Walz questioned Vance if he believes Donald Trump lost the 2020 election.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Gun violence across America came up with Vance saying a mental health crisis is in part to blame.
But I do think it's a big piece of it.
Sometimes it just is the guns.
Walz and Vance were also asked how they would respond to the issue of climate change.
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax.
Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water.
On the topic of childcare and options for a child tax credit, both men seem to find common ground.
I think there is a bipartisan solution here.
But I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options.
Mark Irons, EWTN News in Depth.
Joining us now for analysis of this vice presidential debate, we're joined by two Catholic writers who closely follow politics. Madeleine Kearns is associate editor at the Free Press. Leah Libresco Sargeant is a contributor to Deseret News. Thank you both for being here. In this week's vice presidential debate, there was a lengthy exchange over Minnesota's law in which Tim Walz removed requirements to try and save babies born after an abortion. Here's a clip of that exchange.
You're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric.
These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this...
how? I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Madeleine, what did you think of that exchange, and how has the media been reporting and, quote, fact-checking on this Minnesota law?
Well, I think the problem is that this is actually quite a simple thing. Either the law says this or it doesn't. And it's easy to find out. You just look up the law. And yes, indeed, Governor Walz signed a bill that removed this line. The line was, quote, medical personnel had to preserve the life and health of the born alive infant, end quote. He removed that. Now the law says that they have to care for the infant who is born alive. But of course, care can mean anything. Care can mean you wrap them in a blanket and wait for them to die. So my question is, why wouldn't he answer this question head on? And I think the answer to that is because the truth makes him look bad. There's not any reason that you would remove this part of the law, this protection for born alive infants, unless you thought that born alive infants should be left to die, or at least it should be up to women to decide if they should be left to die. This is a serious problem. And of course, the media fact checkers who lean pro-choice are not going to draw attention to this. And so it was left to Senator Vance to draw attention to this. And he called it, accurately in my view, fundamentally barbaric.
As the debate was taking place, former President Donald Trump announced on social media he will veto a, quote, federal abortion ban if he is reelected. Leah, I'm curious, what stood out to you on how the candidates discussed the abortion issue at this debate? And I'm interested to hear your thoughts specifically on how the Republicans' messaging on the life issue is this election.
I think there's a pretty big split between the messaging that's coming from former President Trump and also from his wife, Melania, who reiterated her commitment to pro-choice rhetoric this week, versus the messaging that was coming from Senator Vance during the debate. One thing that impressed me a lot was him saying, the reason the pro-life movement is losing referendum is because we don't have the trust of the people who are voting. And that he said, it's our job to do a better job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And if we think about the last 50 years of the pro-life movement as being about clearing the way to be able to pass laws, the next 10 years are about building up the trust to be able to pass laws now that Roe doesn't make it impossible to pass them.
There's a lot of work to do on that front as well. Madeleine, one topic that did not come up was the transgender issue. Were you surprised by that? And how much of a factor is the transgender issue in this election?
Well, I was surprised that it didn't come up. Of course, other things didn't come up that are very much newsworthy and worthy of talking about, like Ukraine. The moderator spent 8 minutes on climate change, but didn't think to mention this war in Europe. So yes, that was surprising. I think that Governor Walz would have a difficult job of defending his record on transgenderism. So for instance, in Minnesota is a supposedly quote unquote trans refuge state. That means that if a runaway child goes to Minnesota and seeking so-called gender-affirming care, these surgical interventions and medical interventions, they can get it without the permission of their parents. That is wildly out of step with the views of the American public, and it would have been good to see Senator Vance press Governor Walz on that. Of course, Kamala Harris has also been radical on these issues. She signed on to the Equality Act, which would have redefined sex in federal law to include gender identity. And so, yeah, I think this is an issue that people care about and they would have a difficult job defending.
This debate was also marked by a lot of agreement between the candidates, and including on the topic of childcare and child tax credits. Let's take a listen to this.
A number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible.
Whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case.
Leah, you have written extensively about childcare and child tax credits. Is this a bipartisan issue now? And what have you made on the evolution of this topic?
I think in some ways there's no way it can't be a bipartisan issue. Everyone is competing for family votes, and everyone, insofar as they're reality-based, know that our safety net doesn't do a good enough job protecting parents, especially mothers, during those first few months after a baby is born, when she's still recovering and the baby needs her most. I'd love to see an expansion of paid family leave. I've benefited from it myself. But I do think the CTC and a possible baby bonus are one way of giving a baseline amount of protection to all families, regardless of whether your work offers time off, regardless of whether you're a student and don't have access to paid time off. A generous baby bonus allows every family to make the choice that's right for them by giving them the space away from work to make that choice.
I'm curious to see how it continues to play out as this election continues. Both vice presidential candidates have Catholic connections. J.D. Vance is an adult convert to Catholicism, and Tim Walz was raised in a Catholic home. Madeleine, how have the two campaigns been reaching out to faith-based voters? And you've recently written about how it's a, quote, regrettable move for the country that the Harris campaign says they're skipping the prominent Al Smith Catholic charity dinner. Should both campaigns be doing more to reach out to Catholic voters?
Absolutely. I think Kamala Harris is kind of on the back foot here. She has a record of being aggressive with especially pro-life Catholics. She's tried to, as Attorney General of California, she tried to force pregnancy resource centers to advertise abortions. The Supreme Court said she couldn't do that. So definitely she should be doing everything she can to reach out to Catholics and to reassure them that they are going to be welcome under her administration. I think the Al Smith dinner is a opportunity for Americans to come together, to inject a bit of levity and humor and goodwill, which is much needed, into the political conversation. And so I think her skipping it, which is really, it's a big deal. I think there's only been one other case in the last 40 years of somebody skipping it. That is really, I wouldn't say contemptuous, but it's pretty close to contemptuous sign to Catholics.
Absolutely. Leah, J.D. Vance's skills from Yale Law School were on full display at the debate stage. You're a Yale graduate yourself who enjoys the art of the argument and healthy debate. I'm curious what you thought overall, Leah, of the substance and rhetoric of the Vance-Wall matchup and what it reveals about the health of our political rhetoric.
I think it was obvious to everyone that JD was having a pretty good time on the stage. But what I think was really notable is that element of agreement that came out repeatedly. It really felt watching the debate like Senator Vance was actively competing for votes, trying to find common points, trying to say, if Walz is bringing up a concern about housing, here's my take on this common problem. There were a lot of moments. I felt like the VP debate, kind of absent the headline personalities, wound up as the more kitchen table issue debate. People concerned about housing, jobs, inflation, immigration all came up, and both candidates were agreeing those were some of the most pressing problems for their voters and putting forth much more clearly their claims about how they could be addressed.
Madeleine, we have just about a minute left and also just a month left of this election. I want to give you the last word. Any final thoughts on how significant a VP debate even is and your lasting impressions?
Well, I think that it's obviously not as significant as the presidential debate, but it matters that we're introduced to these candidates who could be second in command come November. And so I think that it was effective in portraying those characters, drawing attention to their differences. And I agree with Leah that I think ultimately Senator Vance did win the night in terms of his performance and his confidence in handling the issues.
Madeleine and Leah, thank you both for joining me and for your thoughtful analysis. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.